Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you're having a fantastic day so far. So with an agreement finally in place to raise the debt ceiling by that June 5th deadline, there are actually two different lawmakers making every effort that they can to block this bill from actually passing. Now the first round of voting is going to be taking place today. So we're going to be going over in this video what they are trying to do to block this bill from passing, but why there actually might be some new hope after all, and why this bill will most likely pass. So we're going to be discussing that in today's video. But before I go ahead and dive into the main content of today's video, if you wouldn't mind helping me out real quickly by just giving this video a like, that just helps out with the good old YouTube algorithm, and also consider subscribing to my channel if you have not already. Okay, so once again, like I mentioned, they must raise the debt ceiling first off by the June 5th deadline. That could potentially be later. And this is very important, again, because if they do not raise the debt ceiling, that's going to cause us to default on our debts, which is going to have really, really bad economic consequences. And as far as Social Security beneficiaries go, that could actually cause a delay in receiving your payment on time, which is something that we definitely cannot afford to have. Okay, so before I go ahead and dive into what is currently going on for today, let's go ahead and jump into a time machine and head back to January earlier on this year. They were holding the House Speaker vote. So in order for Kevin McCarthy to become the House Speaker, he had to make several concessions to members of the House Freedom Caucus, to these other Republicans, in order to get their votes. So actually, it ended up taking 15 different ballots for him to finally become the House Speaker and get the majority vote that he needed. And in order to do this, he gave up a lot of concessions along the way. So some of these concessions were that he had to allow so many members of the House Freedom Caucus, these are members that are more conservative Republicans on different committees. He had to allow at least 3 different House Freedom Caucus members on the Rules Committee, which is basically a committee that any bill, before it actually gets sent to the floor of the House, it has to be approved of at least by the majority of the members in the House Rules Committee. So there were 3 Republicans in that committee, and in that committee we actually have 9 Republicans and 4 Democrats, and we're going to be going over why that's important in just a moment. Now, other than that concession, he actually kind of put his spot in jeopardy. So pretty much at any time, any Republican can kind of like say, hey, I think this seat should be vacated. I think you should be removed from your House Speaker role, and they can call for a vote on that. And there's other concessions as well. So before they vote on any bill, they have to be given at least 3 days to actually read over it rather than just voting on it right away. There are a lot of concessions that were made behind closed doors. We're really not even sure what all these concessions are. They were just kind of like handshake agreements. I'm not even sure if they were all written on pen and paper and signed or anything like that. So there's actually a lot of confusion going on. So one of the members of the House Freedom Caucus that's on this Rules Committee, his name is Chip Roy, and he is claiming that in order for any bill to reach the House floor, it must have unanimous support from Republicans. That would mean that all 9 Republicans in the Rules Committee must vote yes on any bill in order for it to reach the House floor for it to vote. And right now, Chip Roy is very against this debt ceiling bill, and also Ralph Norman is as well. So without their 2 supports, this bill is pretty much essentially dead in the House Rules Committee. It's not going to make its way to the floor for a vote. But he also makes a comment here. He says unanimous, but then he also says at least 7. So if it's at least 7 GOP members, then it's going to come down to another representative by the name of Thomas Massie, who is also in the House Freedom Caucus and may also vote no on the bill. But there's actually some hope for him to potentially vote yes. And again, there is a lot of confusion on whether or not that is actually a rule. Some people are saying, yes, that was a rule. Some people are saying no. But according to CNN, Republican tries to scuttle debt limit bill in House Rules Committee as pressure grows on key swing vote. So Representative Chip Roy accused House Speaker Kevin McCarthy on Monday of cutting a deal that could complicate negotiators' effort to pass a bill to raise the U.S. debt ceiling this week. But McCarthy's allies quickly refuted the Texas Republican, underscoring the tension ahead of a key meeting of the House Rules Committee on Tuesday and putting new pressure on a conservative holdout, Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky, who has yet to take a position on the plan. Roy contended that McCarthy cut a handshake deal in January that all 9 Republicans on the powerful panel must agree to move any legislation forward, otherwise bills could not be considered by the full House for majority approval. That would essentially doom the debt ceiling bill, since Roy, who sits on the panel, and another conservative committee member are trying to stop the bill from advancing. He said, quote, "A reminder that during speaker negotiations to build the coalition, there was explicit both that nothing would pass Rules Committee without at least 7 GOP votes, and that the committee would not allow reporting out rules without unanimous Republican votes." So he's not a fan of this deal, but again, today at 3 p.m. they are going to be holding the votes. Whether or not that rule is actually something that's there, whether it's 9 votes in need, 7, or whether they created any type of rule like that, we really don't know. We're going to learn more today. But the article goes on to say that senior GOP sources acknowledge that there was an agreement for 7 Republican committee members to agree to move forward in order to advance the bill to the floor, but they flatly dispute that there was a deal for all 9 to sign off for legislation to advance. So it's very important whether it's 9 votes or 7 votes that they need, because if it's 9 Republicans that they need to advance this bill to the floor, we have 2 Republicans standing firm that they are no's. But if it's 7, we actually have a pretty good chance, because Thomas Massie may actually still vote yes on the bill. He has not come out and said whether or not he will for sure, but there are signs that he is going to vote yes on the bill, and we're going to be talking about that in just a moment. So the dispute is significant because Roy sits on the committee, which is divided between 9 Republicans and 4 Democrats, as does GOP Representative Ralph Norman of South Carolina. Both men have emerged as leading foes of the bipartisan debt limit bill to avoid a June 5th default, arguing it does little to rein in government spending. A third conservative who sits on the panel, Massie, has been mum about how he plans to handle the rules vote in committee. McCarthy agreed to name all 3 men to the panel as part of the promises he made during his hard-fought speaker's victory, all to give more power to conservatives on committees, including on rules, which is typically stacked with speaker's closest allies. So basically, if McCarthy had a lot of his friends and closest allies on the committee, it would be much easier for him to pass these bills onto the House floor for a vote. But since he has 3 people who might kind of go against him, it makes his life a whole lot more difficult. So if Massie were to join Roy and Norman and vote against the rule at Tuesday's meeting, he could effectively stall the measure in committee. Now, again, thankfully, Massie will probably vote yes, because there have been some signs, both in his tweets and what he actually said earlier on, and we may actually see some Democrats in the House Rules Committee vote in favor of this bill as well, just to give it a little bit more votes. But essentially, Massie's vote is probably going to be the most important here. So the article goes on to say that in January, Massie told CNN he was reluctant to vote against rules to stop bills in their tracks. He said, quote, "I would be reluctant to try to use the Rules Committee to achieve a legislative outcome, particularly if it doesn't represent a large majority of our caucus. So I don't ever intend to use my position on there to hold somebody hostage or hold legislation hostage." So he makes pretty clear there that he's not going to hold this bill hostage, since it has most support from lawmakers, Republicans, and Democrats. So more than likely, he is going to be a yes. Also on Twitter, he tweeted out that we'll be taking out a second mortgage this week to pay off the credit cards, but it's not until September that we're actually buying the bass boat, the tanning bed, and a big screen TV. So he's saying that here, that in September is when we're actually going to be spending the money. But right now, it's pretty clear just based on his tweet that he is going to vote in favor, and they are going to raise the debt ceiling. The article goes on to say that Democrats on the committee may also vote for the rule, sources told CNN, and that would ensure that it has the votes to advance to the floor. But if Massie were to oppose the rule, only 6 Republicans would be in favor of it, complicating McCarthy's efforts to bring the plan to the floor, since he previously agreed to only take up bills with the backing of 7 committee Republicans. Massie's office declined to comment on how he may vote on Tuesday, and neither Roy nor the Speaker's office responded to requests for comments on the Texans' assertion. So again, it's going to come down to Massie's vote to get at least 7 Republicans, even if the other Democrats on the House Rules Committee also vote in favor of it. And as far as when it does, if it does pass the House Rules Committee, then it would go to the House floor for a vote. And at that point, of course, we're going to have a lot of Republicans, probably on the far right, very conservative ones. They might vote no, and we might have people on the far left also voting no. But it seems like they're going to get enough people in the middle, those moderate Democrats and moderate Republicans, vote in favor of it. And actually yesterday we had moderate Democrats coming out and saying that they were in favor of this bill. So according to MSNBC, new Democrat coalition pushes for passage of debt limit bill. So the leadership of the new Democrat coalition on Monday endorsed the bipartisan debt ceiling deal struck by Biden and McCarthy, saying in a release that they would remain in close consultation with the administration to ensure the bill goes to Biden's desk without, quote, unnecessary delay. They said compromise depends on give and take, and this bill requires concessions from both sides. Defaulting on our debt, as some radical Republicans suggest we should do, is not an option. Doing so would plunge the United States into an unprecedented crisis that would likely lose up to 7 million jobs, wipe out $10 trillion in household health, and irreparably damage the economic and political power of the US dollar on the world stage. So they're saying here that defaulting on our debts is absolutely not an option. And of course, in addition to all those very bad things, Social Security payments could also be delayed by maybe a day or two, maybe a week. Nobody really knew, but at the end of the day, it seems like they are finally going to raise the debt ceiling and get this thing passed. But today at 3 p.m., we're going to have to look out for that vote that's going to be taking place on the House Rules Committee. I would say they probably need at least 7 Republicans to make sure that this thing does pass to the House floor. And once it gets to the House floor, they're going to vote on it. They're going to need at least 218 votes in the House. Then it moves on to the Senate. They're going to need at least 60 votes in the Senate. And then finally to Biden's desk to be signed into law. I expect probably all this to be wrapped up at latest by maybe Saturday, but we'll just have to wait and see. But I think there is a lot of hope to get this bill passed, which of course is going to allow the millions of Americans to finally breathe a sigh of relief, especially those receiving Social Security, where the payments thankfully are going to continue going out on time. But that's all the news that I have for today's video. I certainly hope that you enjoyed. If you did, again, I would greatly appreciate it if you could give this video a like. Consider subscribing to my channel if you have not already, and I will see you in the next video.